So today my presentation is entitled, Will Accountants Have a Role to Play in the Future, and What Do They Need to Do to Remain Relevant?
Once upon a time, business as usual was often good enough. No more. Where we are going, good enough is dead. In a world where everything is connected, where everything is equally excellent, where performance is reaching perfection, there's only one space left to innovate in: you. Right now, you are a central point in the raging tornado of change fueled by digitization, mobilization, augmentation, disintermediation, automation. Well, the list goes on. Science fiction is becoming science fact. Think about self-driving cars or computers that can learn and think. The way we work will never be the same. The skills we need will be dramatically different. Winning or losing are now happening faster than ever before. So what's your response? How will you discover new opportunities in one of the most transformational times in human history? Are you driving change, or are you being driven by it? Disruption has become the new normal. With change, it's always gradually, then suddenly, well, things really have stopped happening gradually. This change is exponential. Everything that used to be dumb and disconnected is now wired and intelligent. Cars, cities, ports, farms, even our bodies will be wired with sensors and will talk to each other. These game changers are also combinatorial. They amplify each other, creating a perfect storm of change. Quantum computing fuels big data. The Internet of Things fuels artificial intelligence and deep learning, which fuels robotics. However, anything that cannot be digitized or automated will become extremely valuable. Human-only traits such as creativity, imagination, intuition, emotion, and ethics will be even more important in the future, because machines are very good at simulating, but not at being. Yes, robots and software will do some of our work, but this will allow us to focus on things that cannot be automated. To imagine change squared, you've got to start engaging more with what might be, not just with what is. Immerse yourself in the immediate future, 5 to 7 years out from today. We need to go beyond technology and data to reach human insights and wisdom. Technology represents the how of change, but humans represent the why. The future is about holistic business model. The opportunity is to be liquid, to learn just in time, not just in case, not single improvements, but complete transformations, not individual systems, but new ecosystems. Humanity is where true and lasting value is created. We will engage, relate, and buy things because of the experiences they provide, because of their transformative power. The future doesn't just happen. The future gets happened. The new way to work is to embrace technology, but not to become it. The future is in technology, yet the bigger future lies in transcending it. Let's live and lead from here.
A good introduction to what I plan to cover today. I will share this presentation with you afterwards, and I've also included some other videos that you might wish to go and have a look at. But certainly my most useful source of information for anything to do with the future is the World Economic Forum website, and I encourage you to do reading from there. So today I'm going to be talking about, will accountants have a role in the future? And what do we need to do to remain relevant? And you would all have heard that Gil said, I'm here to talk about the CPD policy. So I'm sure you're all wondering how the CPD policy fits into that. But don't worry, I will get to that. So I think you all will be aware that we live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. The term used is a VUCA world. The specific factors impacting the world of work into the future, and actually we should see the future as today. The fourth industrial revolution obviously has a significant impact on the work accountants will be doing or are already doing. But I think the most critical thing about that technological change is the rate with which that is changing, particularly that around technology. But there are a number of other factors that we need to take into account in addition to that of technology. Other trends impacting the way we work today, besides technology, include the changing nature of work, the fact that people want more flexibility, the future generational needs and expectations about the workplace. Innovation is a disruptor, and that leads to changing business models. What do we do and deal with in terms of longevity and aging societies? What about geopolitical factors? Climate change and reducing natural resources. They say the CFO of the future will be the climate change leader in the organization. And I always wonder what accountants know about climate change. The impact of urbanization, shifts in industries, and of course, very importantly, competition from other professional bodies, those are not that are accountants. So in order for us to remain relevant, there is a need to adapt and to reshape ourselves for the future. SAICA have just concluded a research project. It's called CA 2025. And many of you will think, well, that's only 5 years away. When we started the research, it was 2016. And we actually thought 2025 was a long time away. Needless to say, time is shortened somewhat, and 2025 is just around the corner. But the reality is the name of the project is not intended to signify a date at a point in time. It is really intended to signify that we need to look to the future and therefore make those changes now before the future is upon us. But that research has shown that different skill sets are needed by employers, and that the skills are as important as our technical knowledge, which as accountants is our differentiator. The bottom line is that the accounting profession needs to adapt to remain relevant. Of course, through the research, we looked at a number of different sources. I'm just quoting two today, from the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report, as well as from Singularity University. And you can see the similarity between the two lists, where World Economic Forum talks about complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility as the skills of the future. Singularity, by comparison, talks about critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration across networks, and leading by influencing, agility and adaptability, initiative and entrepreneurship, effective oral and written communication, assessing and analyzing information, and curiosity and imagination. So you can see there's a lot of commonality between those two lists, and you'll see that is, there's a lot of commonality between this and the new framework that we have created as SAICA. So what does our research tell us about how the roles of accountants will change into the future? Firstly, it will inform the way that CAs need to think. So the skills that they need to think with need to adapt. And here we're talking about integrated thinking and the ability to think not only in silos, but across disciplines. It also informs the way CAs will work. CAs will have to be more collaborative in the way that they work with other groups of people. They will also need to adapt the tools that they're required to use for work. And that, I guess, talks largely to technology and the types of technology that we will use in the future. And it also talks to the way CAs contribute and live in the world. And that really is reconsidering our role and really understanding the impact that accountants have on society, particularly as it relates to citizenship. So CAs will survive if they are willing to adapt and change and upskill themselves. Jonas Prising, the chairman and CEO of Manpower Group, said, "In an environment where new skills emerge as fast as others become extinct, employability is less about what you already know and more about your capacity to learn." So there are two things we really need to work on as SAICA. The first is to prepare prospective accountants for jobs that don't yet exist, And secondly, there is a need for existing accountants like yourselves to reskill themselves for future roles. So what has changed in our model? There are 5 key things. First is an increased emphasis on digital acumen, the need to understand and integrate digital disruption into the way we work. Second is to focus on creating sustainable value for a broad range of stakeholders. That's about value creation in business, framing our technical competencies, breaking down traditional discipline, silo approach to presenting knowledge with an increased emphasis on business acumen. Thirdly, ethics and citizenship, where we've expanded that to include all spheres of ethics beyond that of just the code of professional conduct, as well as citizenship. Then integrated thinking, an emphasis on all elements of decision-making acumen, which includes integrated thinking. And ultimately, it's about balancing our learning and development of technical and non-technical competencies. And we refer to the non-technical competencies in the new framework as enabling competencies and professional values and skills. Although the technical competencies should not be diluted, the non-technical competencies need to be integrated with a technical competence. So what have we come up with as our overall objective? And that is to develop chartered accountants who are responsible leaders, who behave ethically and create sustainable value for a wide range of stakeholders within an organization. They do that by using integrated thinking to interpret, analyze, and evaluate. Here's the kicker: financial and non-financial information, enabling them to influence others, make impactful decisions, and thereby contribute meaningfully to society. Knowing accountants like things divided into little boxes, the framework looks as follows, and you'll see that the 3 areas really are integrated. We have the technical competencies in the value creation process, combined with enabling competencies, which are defined as acumens, and overlaid on top of all of that is the professional values and attitudes. I'm going to just take you through each of those very briefly. In terms of the professional values and attitudes, that's the outer, the second circle in. We have 3 professional values and attitudes that we wish to embody in the way we work. The first and most important obviously relates to ethical values and attitudes. And here, as you will see, it expands further beyond just professional ethics, which is the code of professional conduct, but to really understanding business ethics as well as personal ethics. It really all starts with the individual. Secondly, in terms of lifelong learning, values and attitudes, we have self-development as well as adaptability and agility. And I'm sure you've seen that with the exponential rate of change, there is a need to be more adaptable and more agile in the way we work. And then in terms of citizenship, values and attitudes, we refer to personal citizenship, business citizenship, professional citizenship, and global citizenship. And that's really, I like to simplify it by saying, how do we impact society, and how does society see our role as accountants? The second area is the enabling competencies. There are 4. The first you will be very familiar with would be decision-making acumen. And here we talk about analytical and critical thinking, integrated thinking, problem solving, judgment and decision-making, as well as professional skepticism, applying a questioning mindset to everything that we see and everything that we do. Business acumen was highlighted very importantly through our research. People talk about chartered accountants being very good at the technical know-how, the accounting. They can recite the standards backwards, they know the Tax Act backwards, but in reality, we need to make sure that that integrates better with an understanding of business acumen. And there it's important to understand the business internal environment, the business external environment, and here we've included the concept of innovation and creativity. And that really talks to different business models that can be brought about in today's world. It's not talking about creative accounting in terms of cooking the books. So business acumen, very important. And then the 2 remaining acumens really balance each other out. Firstly, the digital acumen, which then balances itself with relational acumen. And I really do believe the more technology we see and we work with, the more important it is for people to display those human attributes. And you saw that, I think, from the video that we showed earlier. So in terms of digital acumen, of course, we had a lot of debate around this. Do we need our chartered accountants to be data scientists and coders? And our conclusion is at point of entry, the answer is no. But it may very well be that post-qualification, some people actually do want to specialize and would then go into that data science or data analytical role as a specialization. And so for point of entry, we talk about data knowledge and strategy, data analytics. We talk about cognitive and non-cognitive systems, and knowing and understanding about new developments and protocols. We really want our new framework to stand the test of time. And today we might be talking about RPA, cloud computing, Internet of Things, and so on. But there may be new developments that come to the fore, and it's really important that as accountants we stay up to date with what those new developments actually are. I'm sure in your own environment you will also understand how critical cybersecurity is. And then, of course, there is a need for improved user competencies in the digital space. Then when it comes to relational acumen, we talk about communication skills, leadership skills, people skills, relationship building skills, teamwork, self-management, managing others, and emotional intelligence. Very important, because I think accountants are often seen as cold and critical, and it really is important with the advent of technology that the human side really does come out in terms of those relational acumens. Now, so far I have not spoken about anything technical, so you might be wondering where the technical is. Don't worry, it's still there. We have reframed this. Typically at the moment when we talk about our framework, we talk about disciplines, accounting, tax, auditing, strategy, risk management, and governance. And you'll see one of the key changes is about getting rid of those silos and really being able to integrate those areas more effectively. And so you'll see the framework at the top, which talks about technical, professional, and enabling. And the enabling competencies really need to be developed within the technical context. You can never develop those enabling competencies in isolation. So we will be developing those enabling competencies within this particular technical framework. We have used the integrated reporting framework here, where we talk about the 6 capitals, again emphasizing the need to move away from just measuring financial information, but to measuring and reporting and assuring non-financial information as well. We take it through the business model process, through inputs, business activities, outputs, and outcomes. And the areas we are referring to from a technical perspective are strategy and governance, protecting the capitals and decision-making, reporting, compliance, assurance, and related services. And those really all need to be understood and seen in a whole context. And the idea is that as professional accountants, our role is to create sustainable value for a wide range of stakeholders over a period of time. What I would like to just show you now is our new project, which is called Future CA Pathways. This, we have now taken the framework to the post-qualification space. We will be launching in the next 2 or 3 weeks a document which will enable you to see for your particular role what competencies are most likely to be needed. This document and interactive website will take you through the key changes, explain the framework, and navigate. I will show you in a minute how that actually works. The way this is set up is we have defined 3 levels, okay, because as you can imagine, with 46 or 47,000 members, it's impossible to define a career path for every single one of them. So it is very generic. It is intended to be a guideline to you. And we've shown proficiency levels for each of the competencies at entry level, mid-management, and senior management. The career paths we have identified, and of course this is something we will continue to do over time, is add to this. We've chosen audit and assurance, consulting, external governance, board and other committees, financial and tax management, general management, investment management. We've chosen one industry specific for now. The chances are that we will identify other specific industries and build those in over time. But banking, a large number of our CAs are in banking, so we've chosen that one. Innovation and entrepreneurship as a career path, technical and digital enabler, and also professional education or academia. What you'll see when you go onto the site is that we've included existing role titles as well as future role titles. And you'll see the future role titles are those that are included in red. So under investment management, we talk about a carbon credit trader or a digital currency trader. Now, I personally have never heard of any of those, but the competencies for that are built into our new model. You talk about financial management, environment and social impact accounting is another area. And under audit and assurance, we talk about machine risk managers, environmental and social impact auditors, artificial intelligence auditors, and algorithm bias auditors. Now, those are all very exciting, sexy titles, and those are the things we need to be migrating towards. I'm not going to go through all of these. I will show you the site, and once it's up and running, it'll be up to you to go through and investigate what is most suitable, you think, for you. For each of those career paths, it will tell you from professional values, that's the blue line. For enabling competencies, that's the green line. And for the purple line is the technical competencies, what it is you should be able to do. So let's talk about continuing professional development. You would have seen in the new framework, under professional values and attitudes, we talk very specifically about lifelong learning. And the new policy has been designed specifically to encourage and promote lifelong learning, as opposed to let me just go on a course for the sake of going on a course for 40 hours because that's what the SAICA requirement says, okay? So the post-qualification competency framework will play a critical role in informing what relevant learning and development opportunities for different roles and levels of CA. And that too has informed the change to the CPD policy, which changes the basis of measurement for lifelong learning for members. So let's start with what is CPD, continuing professional development. It's about maintaining and enhancing your knowledge, skills, and experience related to your professional activities following the completion of formal training. So we all worked hard, we all did 3 years of training contract, we all were 3-year undergraduate, 1-year postgraduate, sat through those tough professional examinations, and now what, okay? CPD really is about continuing that engagement with learning and development post-qualification. So it includes continual maintenance and development of your knowledge, skills, and attitudes. It's also about development of personal qualities that are required to carry out your professional duties. It's about lifelong learning, which in itself is an attitude and a mindset. And at the end of the day, it's about you demonstrating that you have taken personal responsibility for your own learning. CPD can be stimulated by reflection or experience and other learning interventions, which may occur in a variety of ways, which include, but are not limited to, further formal education program, courses, self-study, or peer learning. To enhance the practice of chartered accountants and associates, these activities should be diverse, promote reflective practice, and improve and extend professional competence. Because at the end of the day, in line with the Code of Professional Conduct, irrespective of the role you are in, you are required to undertake your work with professional competence and due care. So what do we mean when we talk about lifelong learning and an attitude of lifelong learning? And this really is the ongoing cycle of being able to unlearn. I like to start with the unlearn part because sometimes things we've learned are not necessarily aligned to the current situation. So it's about unlearning, relearning, and learning. And it's that continuous cycle that we have based our new CPD policy on. We need to make sure we embrace this in order to adapt and reshape the future as accountants. So why does SAICA need to have a CPD policy? I get asked this all the time. The real reason, besides making sure that our members take responsibility for their own learning and development, is to protect the public interest by ensuring that there is a framework within which members commit to ongoing lifelong learning and development throughout their careers, and in demonstrating their competence for their specific roles, that whatever they are, that particular accountant is needing to do. Having a robust CPD policy ultimately insists in protecting SAICA brands, and it embodies the code of conduct through the principle of professional competence and due care. You will know that SAICA has reciprocity agreements with a number of international bodies. We also are recognized by the IRBA, and all of these professional institutes or regulators require that as a professional body you are able to measure that your members are demonstrating a commitment to lifelong learning and undertaking relevant CPD. And that is why we require you to report on that to us on an annual basis, but I'll talk you through those details in a minute. So I think the most fundamental question is, why did we actually go about reviewing and updating our CPD policy? And just to remind you, the old policy refers to the fact that you need to measure in terms of input, which is hours, and that there is a requirement for you to do, 40 hours every year, or 120 hours over a 3-year cycle. What we have seen in our members is that inevitably people wait till the very end of the year and then realize, oops, it's the 1st of December, I now have another 30 hours to do and I've got 1 month to do it in. And I think you all understand that that is not an effective way of learning, and it doesn't demonstrate that you actually have committed yourself to an ongoing attitude of lifelong learning. So the reason why we updated our policy was, first of all, to make sure we remain relevant as a professional body. We understand, and I think you will agree with me, that the growth in knowledge and speed of technological change, plus the obsolescence of existing knowledge, means that qualifying programs can no longer be seen as career-long standing statements of professional competence. How many of you qualified in the last 5 years? Hands up. Okay, quite a few of you, that's good to see. 10 years, 15 years, 30 years. So you'll see, I mean, when I studied many years ago, there were very few statements. Many things have changed in the way we account for things. We need to know and understand about integrated reporting, sustainable development goals, and so on. So it really is important that, depending on your role, you keep up to date with whatever knowledge. But in addition to that, you develop the required skills that are needed for the workplace. So our new policy really embraces that. Also, we wanted to make sure that we were being in line with best practice in terms of adult education. I think an input-based approach, which requires a strict 40 hours, does not take into account the principles of adult-based education. And adult-based education says that as adults we learn differently. So we need to understand why and what value it will add to us in order for us to want to learn. As adults, we want to be respected and to be seen as capable learners. In other words, give me the choice and let me set my own objectives. We would like as adults to learn when they identify something they want to know and become proficient at, and experience something that connects with what is actually happening right now. So it's just in time learning, not just in case learning. And it is responsive to external and internal motivators. Invariably in a workplace like this, that would be promotion or salary increases at the end of the day. So those are the kind of things that drive adults to learn. And when you have a policy that requires you to follow an input or an hours-based approach, it really doesn't embody these principles of adult-based learning. And I think most fundamentally at the core of our policy change is to understand how learning and development takes place. Know that we are all unique and we perform different roles. So the learning we need to undergo is going to be different for each person. We all have different needs. We all learn in different ways. Some people prefer to sit and be lectured to or listen, they're auditory. Some people prefer to read. But the reality is, if you look at how we learn best when we engage with each other, when we engage in doing. But we also learn at different paces, and we need to learn when we need it, not just in case we need it. So those are all the reasons why we decided to amend the CPD policy. So what does the new CPD policy say? And I'm pleased to tell you that we're able to reduce it to 1 page. Those of you familiar with the existing policy will know that it is about a 13 or a 14-page document. And I'm sure many of you have not attempted to read it in the detail that is required. So we really have simplified it down into the core principles in terms of what the policy requires you to do, and it sets out also what SAICA's role in this process is. If you go to future.saica.co.za, it'll take you to a page. It has 3 different categories. One is around sustainable development goals, the other one is around CA 2025, and then we have a section here specifically for CPD, where we outline the CPD policy and philosophy. And you'll see here there are a variety of documents that you can click through to. And if you're particularly interested, you can read the positional document, which outlines the reasons why we came to changing our particular policy. But there are a number of frequently asked questions on here as well. And I encourage you to really go and read all of that yourself. And you can see one of the things we really are trying to direct is that you don't wait for somebody to come and tell you something, but you take responsibility for going to find that out yourself. So one of the things I had to do for this presentation was learn how to embed a YouTube video into my presentation. I went to do that myself. It took me probably a lot longer than it would have taken my son to do, but that's really what it is. I needed it there and then. I went to look it up, I went to do it. I've learned, I now know how to embed a YouTube video. You need software to do it, I figured out. Anyway, back to the new CPD policy. So what is the objective of our policy? This has not changed from the previous policy. The objective of our policy is to make sure that our members maintain and develop their professional competence relevant to their current and future roles. So don't only think about what am I doing today, start thinking about what I'd like to aspire to, and therefore what competencies do I need to develop in order to move into that new role. One of the things they say is that new people entering the job market today will have 5 to 7 different career paths over their lifetime, which means that if they are not lifelong learners, they're not going to be able to do that. Because when I talk about career change, I'm not just talking about moving from a CFO to a CEO, okay, although that can be seen as one. I'm talking about moving from being a CA to being someone who works perhaps as a doctor, okay, and we've had that. We have a member who's medically qualified as a doctor and a chartered accountant. So those are the types of career and role changes that I'm talking about. They can be extreme and they can be within the particular context. So start to think about that. But what we really are looking for is that members take responsibility to reflect on and undertake relevant CPD activities to remain competent in their future and current roles. Now, I can't do that for you. SAICA cannot do that for you. You can only do that for yourself by interrogating, and I think the word really we use here is reflecting. And I'm not sure that CAs are particularly good at reflecting, and so that in itself is a skill I think one needs to develop. It's about reflecting honestly, because we all like to think we're good at everything, but the reality is we may not be. And so we would seek input from external sources, such as your peers or your superiors, in terms of how you are actually faring when it comes to particular competencies. And then you need to take responsibility for recording these CPD activities, because that is your demonstration that you've undertaken relevant and appropriate learning activities for your circumstances. So it's all going to be unique to each of you. You're all going to have a different learning plan because you're all different. So what are your obligations as a member? The first of all, you need to undertake relevant CPD activities annually. Now, obviously, if you work in a technical space, then one of your learning objectives is going to make sure you remain up to date with the technical knowledge that is required. Absolutely. But what skills do you need to develop in that role as a technical advisor to business? And that's the kind of thing that you will actually document in your reflective plan. You need to follow an output-based measurement approach. So we no longer want to see how many hours of learning you're doing. We want to see that you've developed the competence. And so the way we would like to measure that is we require members to keep a reflective plan. There is a template on the SAICA website. Personally, I hate templates because they don't allow you to think. But I'll take you through the process of what the steps are in developing your own reflective plan. You need to keep that for a period of 3 years, and you only need to submit that to SAICA if you are selected for monitoring. Okay, so that is your document, you keep that, that is for your own personal development. What you are required to do is submit an annual declaration to SAICA where we will ask you, have you complied with the policy? And that there are two effectively ways you can be seen as non-compliant with the policy. And I never like to mix compliance and learning and development because they're kind of opposite to each other. But we do, as a professional body, need to measure, and so we have kept it as simple as possible. SAICA also reserves the right to undertake compulsory CPD and to indicate that its members undertake compulsory CPD from time to time. Now, we haven't indicated anything specific for the 2020 year because we obviously want people to get familiar with our new policy and what is required in terms of the new policy. You'll note, if any of you follow URBA or are related to being an RA in any particular way, the IRBA policy has been structured very similarly to SAICA's, except it has a requirement for ethics training of 3 hours every year. And so that's their way. They've actually coded that into their policy. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to be as flexible as possible, but we may from time to time require certain things. The policy also includes what to do if you're a member of another member body, what to do if you have to report to a regulator. There are no longer any exemptions in the policy. The reason for that is you need to reflect on your own personal circumstances. If your personal circumstances are saying that I'm no longer professionally active, then the extent of your CPD obviously changes and is very limited. And we also talk in the policy about reinstatement, because if you have not been a member for a certain period of time, you will have to check that your CPD is up to date. And I think, you know, the example that I like to use is, when it comes to exemptions, is for someone who perhaps needs to be on maternity leave. Because at the end of the day, if you are coming back to work, you still need to be professionally competent. What the policy then allows you to do is to be more flexible during that period of maternity or that you're off work, because you are now responsible for your own learning and development. So let me talk you through very quickly what the reflective plan should address. First and foremost, you need to ask yourself, what is my current role and what future roles would I like to aspire to? Then determine what competencies your role actually requires. Now, where do I get that information from? I think within an organization like this, first and foremost would be your job description, because that would surely outline for you what competencies your role is expected here. But I've shown you the website that we will be launching shortly, where we talk about the future CA pathways, where you can also go to there to look at current and then also future competencies that you might need to develop. Then you need to do a self-assessment and identify which competencies, and that includes knowledge, skills, attributes, and values, you might have gaps in. And then your next step is to identify what the most appropriate learning intervention is. Just to note here that competency may not be fully developed through one intervention. So for example, sitting here today and listening to me, you might still not have got all aspects of the policy. You might need to go away afterwards and read up a little bit more about the policy and why we've changed it. Maybe the frequently asked questions will also give you some further insight. So competency isn't always developed at one sitting. Interventions should cover a wide range of interventions and not just attendance at workshops. we're very much in the habit of learning occurs in a workshop, when in fact that is probably the most ineffective way of learning and development. The most effective way of learning and development is on the job. And I've given some examples here of learning interventions for you to consider. Coaching is extremely effective. You could consider, if you're specializing, further formal qualifications, on-the-job training, workshop seminars, short learning programs, and of course self-directed learning. The thing for learning these days is that it must be flexible and you must be able to do it in your own time. And that's why online learning, there's a lot of very good online learning content, okay, as well as methods engaged in the online platforms that will enable you to learn and develop over time. And herein lies the crux of the new policy. The idea is then that you reflect on the effectiveness of that learning intervention and you continue with that on an ongoing basis. Now, the easiest and the best way to do this is to start the year, probably, okay, because you work on a calendar year, invariably, to start the year by actually capturing and documenting this, and then really just keeping it a live document as you go through the year. SAICA is working on a tool that will enable you to assess your competencies, and from that assessment, identify further learning activities that you may wish to pursue. But again, let me emphasize, this is all about you, okay, and about what you need to do for yourself. And that is, this policy is a lot more flexible in that regard. And what we really are looking for is evidence that you have reflected. So we're not going to try and assess whether you're competent or not, okay? That is for you. Invariably, if you're not competent, I don't think you'll hold the job. So your employer and their performance management processes will obviously overlay on top of this. But at the end of the day, this is for you and your own development as you move through your career as a CA. Just very quickly, if you're a member of another professional body, you have the choice of electing that professional body or SAICA's policy. We will accept either. Some of the bodies we have reciprocity with do still follow an input-based measurement, but there are many that also follow the output-based measurement, so it would be up to you. You would just need to indicate on your declaration which professional body's CPD policy you are following. We also outline what to do if you have to report to a regulator, such as the IRBA, or if you're registered as a tax practitioner with SAICA as your registered body. You would need to meet both policies. So in the case of the IRBA, you would need to mix, and there's not really much difference other, as I indicated, than the 3 hours of ethics. But tax practitioners specifically have to do 15 hours of verifiable CPD. And there we say you must look at the SARS policy for 15 hours, and that obviously needs to be reflected on your reflective learning plan, but you would also need to consider what other skills you need to develop through this process. What are SAICA's obligations in terms of the policy? We will monitor members' compliance with the policy annually. So you would already have seen, now for 2019 you have the option, okay, and I think the timeline has passed. You had until the 31st of January to declare your compliance for the 2019 year, and you could elect either the input or the output method. What we were looking for is a submission of your annual declaration. If you haven't submitted that declaration yet, I think you will be contacted and possibly given a further opportunity to submit that declaration. Remember, at that point in time, we're not looking for evidence, just that you have complied with the policy. And that would be either the old or the new policy. From there, what we will do on an annual basis, last year we had a sample of 900 odd members who we selected for verification. I was one of them, so I know. The sample size we have said will depend on developments in the profession and the risk profile of members within the profession. So some people we would consider at higher risk, so we're looking at ways of how we allocate risk points, if you want, to particular individuals. And we may select more high-risk individuals than those that present less of a risk to SAICA. If you are selected, then you need to submit your reflective plan and you're welcome to submit any other evidence along with that. SAICA, in its new CRM implementation, you'll know that we have a new member portal available for queries and for new member registrations. The next step or phase as part of that Ushinsho project is actually the capturing of declarations. We do acknowledge that the current SAICA CPD system has given us many headaches and many challenges, and I myself have been victim to, I've submitted, but they asked me to submit again. All of those issues will be ironed out when we launch the second phase of our CRM project, because it will be linked automatically to your profile on Microsoft Dynamics, as opposed to sitting on a separate system outside of our current system. And then if you are found to be non-compliant, and I've indicated there are two instances where you could be found to be non-compliant. One, you didn't submit your annual declaration. Two, when you were selected for monitoring, you did not submit your monitoring plan. So at the end of the day, and we've engaged with England and Wales because they've been doing this way of monitoring for many years. The extent of evidence that you need to provide obviously is determined based on your role. And you will have to motivate really to us as to how you've demonstrated your reflection to that lifelong learning process. And then any members who are found to be not compliant will be referred to the legal compliance and discipline department. For those of you that are not aware, the second phase of the GRTT project is looking at the SAICA bylaws and the disciplinary process. And so one of the things they will be looking at in that is that there is a standard fine or sanction for specific deviations from or misconduct in terms of all the disciplinary actions. And so CPD non-compliance would form a part of that. So they haven't come up with what the actual sanctions will be at this point in time, but those will be coming shortly. Before I take any questions, I'd just like to end with what I think is an excellent quote, and largely excellent because it comes from a book that was written in 1972. It's a book called Future Shock by Alvin Toffler, where he says, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." Thank you very much.